Good morning, everyone. It is now 10:26 a.m., and I apologize for the slight delay in conducting today's hearing. It is now March 17, 2023, and I want to welcome everyone present to this meeting. I want to welcome you guys to your Senate chamber, and to those watching at home, saludo para todos hamzo, niman eega man ekong pagonaora. I am Selena Babata, the chair for the EAGI committee. And before we proceed with introductions of the LB staff, I'd like to take care of some housekeeping rules. First and foremost, I'd like to ask everyone to please take a few minutes at this time to silence your cell phones and all electronic devices. This committee appreciates minimal distractions while in session. So if you could please take a few moments right now. Additionally, we are live on cable, local channel 23, and also streaming live on Facebook, the legislature's page. I want to caution everyone that even though we take a short recess if we need to during the hearings, Facebook Live will continue to stream live. And at this time, I'd like to introduce the LB staff who are assisting the committee this morning. First, we will start off with counsel, Mr. Joe Bermudez to my immediate left, and Mr. Devin Macaranas, the legislative assistant assigned to the EAGI committee. Also, I want to introduce our IT staff, Jonathan Diaz, our IT manager, and Mr. Delbert Camacho, who is operating the system today. I also want to take note that we have our Sergeant at Arms present in the chamber, and his role is to keep order in the chamber, and we have Mr. Ben Terlahi assisting us this morning. And at this time, I would like to recognize Legislative Assistant Mr. Devin Macaranas to call the roll.
Senator Selena R. Babauta,
Presente.
Senator Paul A. Manglonia, Senator Donald M. Manglonia,
Present.
Senator Dennis C. Mendiola.
Here.
Madam Chair, all members of the Senate EAGI committee are present.
Thank you, Mr. Macaranas. And we will proceed with the next item up on the agenda, which is the adoption of today's agenda. And I'd like to recognize Senator Paul Manglonia for the proper motion.
So move, Madam Chair, for the adoption of today's agenda.
Motion has been made by Senator Paul Manglonia and has been seconded by Senator Donald Manglonia. Are there any questions or concerns on the motion? All those in favor, please say aye. All those opposed, please say nay. The ayes have it. Today's agenda is duly adopted. At this time, I would like to make a short statement explaining why we're here this morning. This morning, we will be examining the nominees to the Marianas Public Land Trust. Nominees are Mr. Philip Mendiola Long from Tinian, Mr. Alvaro Santos from Saipan, and Dr. Rita A. Sablon, also from Saipan. It is this committee's authority, exercising it under the statute, to examine and vet the credentials of all nominees by the executive branch, and that is why we're here this morning. And at this time, I would like to open the floor for public comments. The floor is now open.
Good morning.
Good morning. Before you begin, I'd like to ask everyone who would like to make public comments to please introduce yourself and the entity you represent.
For the record, Madam Chairman, my name is Juan Manglonia Sablan. I'm from Masteo, Saipan. Good morning, Honorable Madam Chairman, Sena B. R. Babauta, Honorable Senator Paul Manglonia, Honorable Donald Manglonia, and Honorable Dennis Mendiola. members of the Senate Executive Appointment and Government Investigation Committee. I'm appearing before you to ask your support to confirm the nominee of Alvaro A. Santos, fondly known as Al, for the MPLT Board of Trustees. I worked with Al as a commissioner for the Commonwealth Casino Commission for over 5 years. I can attest for his dedication in performing his duties and responsibility honorably to implement fully the casino laws and regulations. During the early years of implementation of the casino, I was working tediously page per page on the casino regulations and casino internal control co-mix. He always at the casino office working along with me, another commissioner, in ensuring that the casino regulation internal control is perfected and implemented. If I recall correctly, he never missed commissioners' working meeting, special meetings, regular meetings, monthly meetings. He always there to share his knowledge with the other commissioner. He is very professional and humble to the other commissioner, including myself. Sometimes when the discussion is too hot, I'll act as a pacifier. He's a straightforward shooter. I will not back down if he knows he's right. During off-island conferences and meetings, trainings, Al is there taking notes and asking questions. This type of person like Al, who takes responsibilities seriously, as Al was a congressman in the 9th legislature, everybody know, I think. At one time I asked him, and I don't always still recall, why do you not seek re-election for another term? He noted to me that he was not cut to become congressman. In other words, he loved to work in the area of his expertise with dignity. Our educational achievements, having a bachelor degree in accounting, a master degree in finance, a long-time employee with the Northern Marianas College, holding management positions, and being former member of MPLT Board of Trustees as chairman. I can assure this humble body of the Senate that I was exceptionally asset to MPLT. He is going to be there with little or no learning experience or no learning curve. He'll be there in day one, and he knows what to do as trustee. In closing, I assure this humble body of the Senate that you will be making the right decision confirming the nominee of our Honorable Governor, Arno Palacios, for Alvaro A. Santos to the MPLT Board of Trustees. Tangkulo na si Diyos Masid, and thank you for opportunity to allow me to share my knowledge and experience with Al, working with the Casino Commission. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sablan. The floor is still open.
Good morning. My name is Agnes Manglonia McFeeters. I'm here representing, I would say, the general public, since I have retired from NMC, from all educational system, and also from the government. So right now I can rightly say that I represent the public of the CNMI. I'm here to ask this committee to please consider Mr. Alvaro Santos. Mr. Alvaro Santos had worked with me at Northern Marianas College when we just started the institution. And when you're starting an institution, it is not the same as when you have the institution with all the money and all the needs that you have. At that time, NMC was receiving very little appropriation, since at that time, most of the legislature did not even go to college. So they did not really realize the importance of having a college in the CNMI. Mr. Al Santos and I worked really hard to see that we improve our institution since we started our college with $75,000, for you to know. And with that money, we know that we cannot really run an institution. But with Al as the vice president for administration and also the knowledge that he have in finance, he has helped us to develop not just from what the legislature appropriate, but more money from different ways and different sources. And we were able to expand this institution so that we have today the college that we have. I am not going to say the type of degrees and all that, because I'm sure you have all the things that he had accomplished. But what he had shown with me is that he's very trustworthy. He's very interested in developing the CNMI, especially its people. He is a very honest individual and hardworking individual. We will not have the college we have today without Al as my assistant, as the vice president of administration. So with this thing that I have with him, I hope this committee will consider him to approve, because he had proven that he loved our people, and he is also a very honest person to be working again in trying to bring in more revenue for the CNMI and use the revenue properly as he had guided us when he was at the college. I want to also, although I didn't realize that my nephew is also being introduced for this, I would like for this committee to consider my nephew from Tinian. I know he's a businessman. He had worked for education. And I'm sure that the quality that he has will also be helpful for this, for what you are going to be considering. So I ask this committee to please do not hesitate in confirming Al Santos, because he is a person that will help our CNMI to grow. Thank you very much for listening to me.
Mrs. Mase, Senora McFeeters, the floor is still open.
Good morning, Chair, members of the committee. My name is Robert Torres. I'm an attorney in private practice, and I'm an attorney for the Marinas Public Land Trust. And I've represented MPLT for almost 15 years, I believe. I come here to, the committee already obviously has the qualifications of the nominees. And the purpose this morning is to vet and seeking your advice and consent. I would start simply that this administration's theme of that trust is appropriate here. This morning, MPLT's investment balance stands at over $100 million. And you need to be able to have the trust of the nominees to be able to properly manage that with the standard of a prudent investor, to be able to bring the returns that is consistent with the markets and are above the market return, in order, as you know, to distribute the interest income that is invested from the public lands proceeds, then distribute that to the general fund for the legislature's determination as to what is appropriate for appropriations for what programs are in the best interest of the CNMI. But today, the trustees are below quorum. As you may know, we only have 2 remaining trustees since January. And as a result of that, it's imperative for the committee and the administration to bring the additional 3 trustees online so that the trust can continue doing its business to attend to the monitoring and the administration of the investment. For the community and the legislature and the entire Commonwealth, MPLT's information is on our website. We have an investment policy statement, and that investment policy statement is the standard of investment that you have to have a policy which sets out the rules and the percentages and the standards that you are going to be aiming for so that you can make money and bring back the returns responsibly. But the most important thing that the community and the Senate and the administration would know is that with a fiduciary duty of each trustee, they are held under the Constitution for a strict fiduciary duty. There's fiduciary and there's a strict fiduciary. That means that they are personally liable for the money that they are entrusted with and the standard of care that they are entrusted with. And that if they breach that fiduciary duty, as you know, they are responsible for it. So, of course, the examination is important. And the committee knows, and I'm familiar with the nominees, and they have the experience that you see in their resume. But at the same time, you have Mr. Long as his prior service and his credentials in investment fiduciary, along with the institution of APAS, which is part of the regional association of fiduciaries throughout Micronesia. And of course, nominee Santos and his prior experience and his background in finance. But we also have the nominee of Dr. Rita Sablan, who comes from education. But perhaps the important standards, besides the diversity of a female nominee onto the trust, is her research and background and qualifications, that it shows the attention to scholarship and informing herself into the responsibilities of the trust. It's a pretty steep learning curve because you don't have time to get up to speed. You got to know and hit the ground running because you have to make these decisions, especially in today's market where even banks occupy a tenuous position, with respect to losses of investments on the mainland. And so in the years that have passed and the years to come, every trustee of MPLT starts out their meeting with regard to the people of the CNMI and how they can steward the money responsibly. And as I come before you to inform the committee about the importance of the work and the critical nature of proceeding with the examination so that hopefully they will obtain the approval of this committee and the Senate body for confirmation. And I would just simply urge everyone, every member of the community, as well as the members of the legislature, to continue to assist MPLT in the sense that it continues to work to be able to bring the return on investment so that you folks can appropriate the money. And we know that in recent times past, that the administration has come to MPLT for that assistance. But the trustees always have this challenge of wanting to assist always, like even with the U2 loans. But at the same time, to do so responsibly and not waste or allow the money to be wasted, the maximum return for the maximum benefit for the people of the CNMI. And we think that from MPLT and the staff, that that's absolutely consistent with the role of the legislature and the administration. And so for these reasons, I urge the committee to fully examine all the nominees, but it's our view over at MPLT that it's imperative that their nominations, if confirmed, that they can immediately be sworn in so they can assume their duties so that MPLT can get on with the business of working to bring back those returns of investments. And thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Torres. The floor is still open. If there are no other individuals from the community who would like to make public comments, we will move along. Recognize Senora Agnes McFeeters.
Thank you very much for recognizing me again. I am again Agnes Manglonia McFeeters. And I did not realize that one of the used to be an educator is also nominated. And I don't feel good not to say that she's also very, very qualified. Because if you're an educator, you know that you're trying to make the CNMI the best and the best place to be. And Rita is Ms. Rita is here for that, and I am asking you also to consider her because I know her as a teacher, as a principal, and also as the head of the education department. And with those kind of background, I'm sure that she will do a great job in this particular endeavor. So please consider also Ms. Rita Sablan. Thank you very much.
Sizosmase Talumbay, Senora McFeeters. The floor is still open. Again, Mr. Sablan.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Again, my name is Juan Manglonia Sablan. It looks like the only two testifying on this big body. But anyways, I don't know so whether Rita Sablan is not one of the nominee. And for the information of the senators, I used to work with Rita, Dr. Sablan, as president of the PTSA, Students Associations, Parents. And I work with her practically before every meeting. Sometimes I go down up there to meet him once a month to talk about the situation in school. And she listens, she takes our recommendations seriously. And we held several meetings in Rhoda, parents and teachers, Saipan and Tinian together. So I hope that you support her. She's very professional, she's kind, and she do listens. That's very important. I know she can learn very easily. She got a doctorate degree. She can read and write pretty efficiently. So learning the curve, again, it's pretty easy for her. So let's not put people that takes time to learn. She's there to learn, and she'll learn hard. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Sizosmase Talumbay, Mr. Sablan, the floor is still open.
Buenas, half a day. Todo fanang tumungo ni di atcha bebe Marianas na no. Long time ago gwa vocabulary lo pun mangay gistip todo duman mane ekung dilenya. No mass, no entry. Lo as an educator lo ki ugef tungu sirita sa tau gimong karmo. What year is that read? I was still a holy nun, but now I'm full of holes day. Lo no maulik sirita pues estige lo ki famogono. Sa guaw, dyan si Agnes McFeeters, esta kwam. Lo inanaya animo, kalan emotional day sinansalan. Lo no, estige mo na fan good iman ko. Bandan espiritual. Espiritual kumekeleng na tiji pron kada dia dumimo somos misa. Bulan akrosi. Una juda ifamagun ni munisisita. Iman na masi. Ifamagun ni man ma-abandona, man ma-abuse. Pues eska omku, sige tanoi animo jamjulokin ni man hobin, asisti di pandan espiritual. Ajuda haji munisisita, pues ibitud ejita alum tafang, ta respeta todos, masyahafa na nasyon. Unity brings harmony. Esta pa where the world citizen. Toda de fifectuid sa moro pat fifectuid esti. Tafana ajuda unus dan outro. Si Jus maasi.
Si dus masi, por favor, antitsailang. Kasi yung biro tatizong fatatsungan rata dun sangan inaan mo sa tin deklara. Ito tun. Para record. Sa marirecord esti.
Ungan ay di dispensa di gini mo
I'm so excited.
puti amku. Ahista ne amku magot. Na anu ne giji official
Mm.
Rosa Tudela Palacios. Lo pago ne todo ita ne gua carinho no Francisco si Paquito pus gua ne Rosa kana todo si Rosa man agang chai lo gua de ad lang zafanan an mafaisin zuling na hofana ogu Rosa za agang ti chai lang leku fanan gua mos pot gungi manilu ne cinco ami pus busy lang na Rosita lo ita ne mosin man ti man fifectu pura di lo Espanyol bagoso no pus sinanaw na Tudela Espanyol bagoso pus adi chai lang si Sus mosi Rosa Tudela Palacio si maganan no
Si dus masi,
ja paray
antitsailang.
man hobin ne niya acha bebe Marianas.
Si dus masi. The floor is still open. If there are no other individuals, I'd like to state for the record that we also received written letters of support specifically from Mr. Claudio Narita in support of the nominee, Dr. Rita A. Sablan. We also received a letter of support from Mr. Ed Ariola Jr. for nominee Philip Mindiola Long and Mr. Bruce McMillan in support of Philip Mendiola Long as well, for the record. At this time, I would like to invite the Special Assistant for Administration.
Madam Chair, before you bring other people in, since you're stating all the letters to the committee, I have one from Ms. Johanna Ada. I believe copies have been provided
Okay.
to the members, and this is in support for Dr. Rita Hokog Inos. I'm sorry, Dr. Excuse me, Dr. Rita Sablan. I know she doesn't know the other 2 or 3 for today's hearing, but if she knows them that they're being heard today, she'll probably have comments. But I just want to note that she commented in support of Dr. Rita Sablan. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Manglonia. At this time, we will continue. I'd like to call the Special Assistant for Administration, Mr. Oscar Babauta, as well to introduce the nominees. As well as the nominees, you may take your seats at the table. Del. Mr. Babauta, you may proceed when you're ready.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And also that goes to our esteemed members of our EAGI committee. Good morning again, once again, and Tiro, Fadaidan, buenos dias. Madam Chair, no, I do not wish to dwell on the introduction much because our public witnesses that have stepped forward have pretty much taken the context of my introduction to all these people, enumerating each of their nominees' background and experiences, and sharing, their as co-workers with the other witnesses. However, Madam Chair, thank you for the opportunity, Talos. Once again, I'd like to greet all of you on behalf of Governor Palacios, Lieutenant Governor Apatang, and the entire administration staff, the people of the Commonwealth this morning. And I'm very honored and privileged and happy to be here to join all of you in officially introducing the administration's nominees for the members of the Marianas Public Land Trust, whom our chief executives, both of them, have every confidence and trust in the merits of their backgrounds and that of their experiences over the past several years. We have the longest one, who is Mr. Santos, who is a very intellectual individual, both in his private practice, private life, and as well as government services, and the likes of Dr. Rita A. Sablan, who has been praised highly in the community for his esteemed leadership in both the educational institutions and other private endeavor in the Commonwealth. Lastly, Madam Chair, I wish to indulge the presence also of another nominee, an esteemed nominee, a fine young gentleman, not necessarily young, but in terms of a nominee himself to the board, I would say he's the youngest among the three. If I'm correct, definitely I am correctly uh, been informed that he is the youngest among the three. However, Mr. Long has an esteemed also character, both in fiduciary and a long time private entrepreneur individual from our neighboring island of Tinian, who is willing and able and capable in serving our people through the Marianas Public Land Trust. The administration wholeheartedly requests you, Madam Chair, and the honorable Senate members in the committee, and of course in the full Senate, in representing them or presenting them to the full Senate for their honorable votes, so that our people and that of the agency that they will be serving can move forward. Uh, and this is the only request that, and I understand that some of you might have probably inquiry, but I leave it up to the nominees to task with that answer to any inquiry that you each and any of you might have this morning. But again, Madam Chair and members, I am honored and pleased to introduce Dr. Rita Sablon, uh, female nominee of the Public Land Trust, Maryland's Public Land Trust, Dr. Rita or Don Sablon, so stand corrected. And of course, an humble gentleman from the neighboring island of Tinian, Mr. Philip Mendiola Long. And of course, a good friend and former colleague of mine in the House of Representatives, our esteemed, hardworking individual, longtime educator, and at one time a policymaker in the House of Representatives, Mr. Alvaro Ariola Santos. With that being said, Madam Chair, it is my pleasure again to officially bring these three nominees before you for your hearing this morning. And thank you for the opportunity. And on behalf of the administration of the Palacios Zapatan, we thank you in advance for your kind considerations during this hearing. We sincerely appreciate all your time and effort vested in these hearings and future hearings coming our way today, almost the whole day,
Yep.
and next week again. So we get to see you more often, Madam Chair, and your members. And I thank you again for the opportunity. Good morning.
Citizens Mose, Mr. Babalta. At this time, I'd like to ask the nominees to please stand and raise your right hand while Mr. Devin Macaranas will administer your oath.
Dr. Rita A. Sablon, Philip Mendiola. Oh, sorry. Dr. Rita A. Sablon, Philip Mendiola Long, and Mr. Alvaro Santos, you do solemnly swear under the penalty of perjury, that the testimony you shall give in the matter at hand shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. Thank you.
Mrs. Mossett, please take your seats. This time we will proceed with the question and answer portion. And I'd like to advise you that any other member of the Senate who is not a member of the Committee on EAGI is more than welcome to sit with us and ask their own questions as allowed by the rules. At this time, I'll open the floor to members. Oh, yeah, we're getting there. First, from the members, if you'd like to make statements at this time. If there are none, I will open the floor for each of the nominee if you would like to make your own opening statements at this time.
Ladies first before the men. Good morning and half a day. Madam Senator and Honorable Chairwoman Selena Roberto Babauta, and Honorable Senators and members of the Senate Committee on Executive Appointments and Government Investigations Committee. I'm Rita A. Sablon, a resident of Saipan, a parent of 2 children with 7 grandchildren, married to Francisco Castro Sablon for many wonderful years. I am here today as a nominee to the Marianas Public Land Trust Board of Trustee, nominated by Honorable Governor Arnold I. Palacios and Honorable Lieutenant Governor David M. Apatang. I received this nomination with mixed emotions. However, it is my pleasure to serve the general public once again and in a different capacity, and to respond to the call of Governor Palacios and Lieutenant Governor Apatang. I'll stop at this time and probably proceed with questions later on after all the introductions.
Very well. Any other nominee who would like to make any opening statements?
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of this committee. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank you for giving me the opportunity to come before this committee. And I would like also to thank Governor Palacios and Lieutenant Governor Apatang for their confidence in nominating me to the Marianas Public Land Trust once more as a trustee. And I want to thank also some of the people that expressed their support for my nomination. And I'll be very glad to respond to any question that the committee may have to the best of my abilities. Jesus Masi.
Mrs. Mossett, Mr. Santos, would you like to make an opening statement, Mr. Long?
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Madam Chair and esteemed members of this committee. I'd also like to thank the committee for their time this morning in reviewing some of our extensive resumes and preparing for this session to go over the appointment and hopefully confirmation of myself and my 2 colleagues to my right and left. The MPLT board is very important at the trustee level as a fiduciary, probably one of the most significant responsibilities that any appointment from the governor's office could have. So we take that seriously. I specifically do. And I would like to thank the governor, Governor Palacios, Lieutenant Governor Apatang, for that appointment and working with me in convincing me to accept the appointment and then come back on to MPLT. I would be happy to answer any questions that the members have. Both Alvaro and I have extensive knowledge about MPLT and our previous appointments, and we would love to help you understand a little bit more of the role and the responsibility of the trustee, and then any specific questions you have regarding our personal backgrounds. So thank you again, Sejus Masi.
Mrs. Mossett, Mr. Mendiola Long. At this time, I will open the floor for members of the EAGI committee to begin their questions to the nominees. Who would like to open up? Recognize Senator Paul Minglonia.
I guess we're all familiar with the nominees before us, Madam Chair. So I'm just going to maybe, and I don't know how to start this discussion, but how do we take politics out of MPLT? Anybody want to comment? Um, Attorney Robert Torres was up here earlier and said there's no quorum. And, I'm reading at the transition report on MPLT, and they mention about, how you're going to give a loan to someone, and it takes convincing the governor to transfer money from DPL, and then to give to a particular loan. This kind of stuff, the governor getting involved, or trying to wrestle DPL to transfer money, and all this. How do we take that out of how do we take politics out of MPLT? After all, the Constitution provides that it's a 6-year term, right? So supposedly that's there to kind of like stagger it so that it goes into the next administration's term and give you longer time to look at and study your investment. So can we hear from you? How do we take politics out of MPLT? Because the role, after all, is to increase the your assets, right? And so I find it very disturbing that this trust, which is supposed to take this money from Northern Marianas Descent uh, assets, and politics still have a big hand in there. Anybody wants to volunteer to answer that first? Thank you, Madam Chair.
Recognize Mr. Philip Mendiola Long.
Yeah, you had to start with the tough question. No, I think ambiguity in law and the clarity of regulation breeds room for politicians to get involved. If there's clarity in policy in the law, for instance, for DPL mandated when exactly do they make the distribution versus the ambiguity of, every fiscal year, it could be monthly, it could be quarterly. And we could clarify what an actual expenditure is, authorized acceptable expenditure for DPL prior to that transfer to MPLT. So we're hoping the MPLT, we could work with our legal counsel and then show you some of the areas where ambiguity breeds, and then allows an adversary to take a position in that ambiguity, meaning it's unclear, with specificity of when that actual allocation is supposed to be distributed, or what I'm allowed to withhold from MPLT. So in that ambiguity breeds argument, and then at that point positions MPLT against DPL on what is an acceptable expenditure that they can withhold, and then when that deposit or that transfer should occur. So I think that would help if we could work on legislative language that clarifies the specificity of when, how, and in what mechanism DPL makes that transfer. Likewise, for MPLT to the legislature, I know the Senate is entertaining a constitutional amendment for appropriation through the body of the legislature for indigenous beneficiaries. Which, in my opinion, was the intent of the MPLT funds. So again, that specificity that would require the legislature to appropriate only to indigenous funds in lieu of it being ambiguous. You guys receive the fund and it's appropriated to everybody as a one lot. So I think that would be my answer, is the lack of specificity and clarity of in the law that dictates or directs what the legislature and the people would like to see happen. Thank you.
So can if you guys are confirmed, can you guys assure us within reasonable time, give us the language of that legislation? You've all been there, the two of you at least, Mr. Santos and Phil, and I see some of the board members here, and you have your attorney here. That would be simple to do, right? I mean, it's not a new issue. Give us the language so that we can put that in there, and something the legislature might have to debate. I don't know. We have to look at the Constitution, but I think that has to be clarified, because for me, it is not right that the release of revenue from DPL should be controlled by somebody outside the law, right? I mean, so if it is, then there's no law. So we have to put in the language that will be fair, and that then would help MPLT, because the sooner that money is transferred to you, the sooner you can start earning from the getting earnings from those interests. I have many questions, but I just want to start out with that, and then allow the members then come back to give them an opportunity. But can I hear from the other two nominees?
If I
the-
may, Madam
Yeah.
Chair,
You
I do
may.
agree with Mr. Philip Long here about, how laws can really, cause some stress and hardship in terms of how policymakers make decisions. And so it is important to always go back and ensure that there is clarity when it comes to, regulations or policies that are being developed or implemented out there. And so when I came coming here, I was thinking of the Constitution, Article 11, MPLT, DPL, and all the public laws that have been developed and are out there. And now there's a recent legislation, it's House Bill 2328, about the timely transfer of funds. But I think there needs to be more clarity in terms of where or how is this really going to, happen? When do money get transferred? Why do they have to be transferred to MPLT, and so on and so forth? So I am glad that our legal counsel is here so that he understands, some of these issues that are so critical and important, and they're real because they're really hampering, our investment. Monies that we fail to get or receive from DPL is money that has not been invested, and therefore returns have not been made. So I do strongly agree that we need to do some clarification with the public laws that are out there, or make amendments to ensure that those are clear when it comes to funds for the MPLT.
Thank you, Dr. Sablon. I'd like to recognize Senator Dennis Mendiola at this time.
Thank you for that answer. So Senator Pohl's question is pretty much talking about, he's pretty much referring to politics, right? How do we take out politics from a lot of this promulgating regulations in as trustees? So when Mr. Long mentioned about leaving it to the legislature, now my question is, do you think that's dangerous? Would you agree that if you move that authority or that responsibility to the legislature, do you see the danger in that in terms of politics? Or rather, should we leave it with MPLT trustees so that we can allow you guys to promulgate and try and eliminate politics from that? I'd like to hear from you guys.
Let me offer, in my experience during my term with MPLT, the area that was problematic in terms of the movement of monies from DPL to MPLT and the emergency declaration by the administration. There should be a clear definition and role of the administration when it comes to emergency declarations, because there was an instant where we did not agree with the administration call to dip into MPLT corpus. And that was a contentious area at the time, and we were able to prevail at the time because our legal counsel, citing, I'm sure, the Constitution, said that it was not applicable to MPLT. It pretty much was infringing into the sanctity of the autonomy of MPLT. So the administration at the time was not able to dip its fingers into the MPLT corpus. because that would have been very disruptive and in violation also on the so-called autonomy of MPLT. The other area about remittance of funds from DPL to MPLT, I agree with my two colleagues that I think in the future and with the participation of the legislature, that we should have some kind of mechanism, legislative mechanism, in which there is a clear knowledge and by DPL that they should be remitting public land lease monies to MPLT. The roles are pretty much defined. Public land, a DPL manages public land. MPLT invests leases from public land. So that is crystal clear. Now, the religiousness of remitting the public land, that's the area that has become a contentious area. That even at one time, MPLT had to sue DPL. And I think at the time it was MPLA. So that didn't get anywhere. We just spent money paying legal fees. And DPL or MPLA at the time continued to violate the agreement because there was an agreement that was drawn up. So we were thinking of a mechanism where DPL should be compelled either by legislation, amendment to the Constitution, and so forth. But I'm glad that that was cited in the transition report, that something has to be done to make sure that DPL religiously submit the funds over to MPLT. And we don't want this, as we call it in tomorrow, mamafti remittance, because it bred lack of trust. We don't know when we're going to get the money from DPL. Like MPLT was always at the mercy of DPL because DPL was using a very strong case or excuse that we have to set aside money for the development of homestead, for infrastructure. I myself, as a chairman at the time, I had to argue with the DPL administrator at the time too, because they had the money, millions, sitting idle in the bank, earning minuscule interest earnings. And I will go and practically almost beg, let us have the funds while you're working on your design and all your plan about the infrastructure development in the homesteads. Let us invest it. Mala tanafanyarda no gatsung no interest. Munana jan plano mo jan and naipudi homestead development. But apparently that was just an excuse, oftentimes on the part of DPL. And that was the frustration that MPLT had to undergo, at least during my time for 6 years. That was one of my frustration of trying to get those people to cooperate with us. We just wanted to, to make use of that money that's sitting idle in a bank account here. So I am also in favor that we should have some kind of a legal mechanism to compel DPL in religious order to remit the money so we can invest it. And of course, the more we invest, the more earnings we realize, and the faster we can retire the government's debt of 15 million, the U2 loan, and of course more money for the DLI, diversified loan investment
Mr. Santos,
portfolio. Thank you.
I think está na una explanation para essa question, so allow me na be continue fan por favor.
Okay.
Speaking of infrastructure, malaguzo bay tungo put esti na committee report in Manayo. It's very interesting. Something about procuring property. So I'd like for you to just kind of elaborate on that, if you can. This is back in 2007, I believe, when the MPLT procured a property right here in Capitol Hill. I'm interested to know if there's music plans in Isgate.
I'll be glad to share with the committee, Madam Chair, a little bit of background on how that came about. When I came on board in 2006, along with two other new trustees, we had a bad experience being situated at the retirement building at the time. We had a small space, and with all the records accumulating, over time, we didn't have storage room available. We didn't have a division within the office for any kind of privacy when we conducted our meetings. So we asked retirement fund at the time to give us additional space. We were just borrowing the conference room whenever we wanted to meet. PSS at the time kind of dominated the whole building. PSS at the time refused to give us an additional room. So that forced us to move over to Morgan's building in Oliai. After discussing with the other trustees and the staff, I found out that MPLT from its inception had been moved 6 times. First, it was at the financial consultant's home. Second, it was Joten's building in Susupi. Then retirement fund. Then the government offered us the EMO, present EMO building, which we renovated, and we spent $39,000. Then now it's up here at the other government building. So it was at that time, Madam Chair and members, that we thought, hey, we're tired of moving around, and MPLT is a perpetual agency. It's going to be here for a long time because our mandate is for the posterity, benefit of posterity. So I approached DPL and I said, can you give us a government house up here and we will develop it, we'll renovate it, but give us permanent ownership, please. We're tired of being moved around. DPL at the time refused. They told me, we can only designate because there is a grand plan for Capitol Hill to be commercialized in the future. And investors are coming. And the land value will go up. On that premise, we decided, that's it. Let's buy our own place, a land. And also that's when we decided that we will buy land up here in Capitol Hill. Principally for that reason, and the other reason was the tsunami threat. Because earlier that year, we had garment factory workers being bused up here every time there's a tsunami threat. And they'll be up here for several hours until the threat is gone. So for those two reasons that we chose Capitol Hill. But to go back answering your question, we just decided, and all the trustees, it was unanimous. We were just tired of being moved around. We want a place of our own. Initially, the government gave us a lot up here, but then lo and behold, after we spent $2,000 to have it surveyed, it was decided to assign that for the Palau consulate. And we blew $2,000 right there for the survey. Then the other moving around followed. So that's how we started with the idea, Senator, of buying our place, own place. And we all agreed, we got to buy our own land. We'll build our commercial building, and it's gonna our commercial building and our office. And that's going to be the permanent place for MPLT. So that's
Perfect.
the story
So,
of.
so with that in mind, would you say that that's now the plan moving forward? That hopefully we can see something on that property and hopefully make our investment on that property worthwhile for
In fact,
MPLT?
at the time, Senator, we already request for proposal for A&E because we bought the land, 4,000 square meters. It was it was appraised at $71. We bought it for $68 per square meter. So we bought 4,000 square meters. So we started issuing the RFP for the design of our office. But lo and behold, the financial crisis of 2008 came around. And the governor at the time asked us, could you guys hold off on your project and continue to give us the annual $2 million a remittance? Because he knew that we will have to pull some of the required capital from the corpus. So we refrained from doing that. In fact, we started receiving already some RFPs, but then we had to hold off everything. We froze. So up to now, that project was on hold. But the land still there, it belongs to MPLT. So, Senator, that's
So my understanding on your response is that there is
there
is plan to move forward given funding support, maybe.
yes, and
No.
at least we already have a land in case MPLT gets chased out of that last building.
Thank you.
Which
Thank you,
we
Mr.
spent,
Santos.
I think over 80,000 up there.
Thank you. I just want you to understand that we got to make sure that we ask these questions. You know, sa bula
problem.
no man interesado, about it. So I want to
Yeah.
make sure that I ask
No
that
problem.
question. So
I
I'm
was
glad that you answered it, and
Yes.
it sounds like you guys. I'm sure that you're gonna get with your colleagues and hopefully come up with a plan with that. Madam Chair, I yield for now.
Thank you, Senator Mendiola. In line with that questioning, is that a lease or fee simple?
We bought the land, Madam Chair, from Vicente and Tina Camacho.
So it's fee simple.
Fee simple, yes.
Who owns the land now? Is it in,
MPLT,
is it in MPLT's name?
yes. MPLT owns the land.
My understanding is any public land is owned by DPL or administered by DPL. So I need to understand, how did it come about that MPLT now owns the land? Does MPLT have the constitutional or the statutory authority to purchase real estate?
Apparently, we were able to do it because we ran it also through our legal counsel about purchasing a private property.
Okay. Well, DPL is also, the nominee is up for confirmation hearing. We can also ask her of that.
Yes.
I want to make a few comments here with respect to Dr. Rita Sablon's reference to House Bill 2328. It was authored by Representative Angelo Camacho and sponsored by many others. I'd like to ask the nominees, if you do get confirmed, to please provide your comments on that bill. Also, there is a current legislative initiative in the JGL, Committee Judiciary, Government and Law, which I also incidentally chair, authored and introduced by Senator Edith De Leon Guerrero, to create a separate account for the benefit of NMDs. And I'd like to once again ask you, if confirmed, to please comment on that. We did receive one comment so far from the current chair of MPLT, Mr. Vianney Hokok. And we're talking about a legislative initiative here. We're trying to amend. What this bill proposes is that it will try to amend the Constitution. And I think we need to examine any amendments to the Constitution seriously And I'd like to receive your comments on that, if and when you do get confirmed. You also, Mr. Santos, alluded to in your comments, if we invest more, we will have more money, or something to that effect, money for NMD programs. But I'd like to ask any of you to please respond. How can we have more money for NMD programs if we have $250 million frozen in a Russian bank? Would any of the nominees like to answer or speak to that?
Thank you, Madam Chair. With regard to investments, the way it works is DPL, after administrative costs and withholding costs to run their department, they would transfer over what the balance is for that given year. Supposedly, that's supposed to be the mechanism. And then what MPLT would do is we'd put that in the corpus and it'd be distributed among the different baskets of investments we've had. Or the board, the trustees would meet and direct that particular allotment to a specific basket that yields a particular result that we're looking for. For instance, if we wanted to accelerate the rate in which the general fund pays off its debt to MPLT of 15 million, the next allotment that we receive from DPL supposedly would go to the bond market, because that yields an interest which is automatically diverted to the general fund after every year. Unfortunately, it's probably not a good time to make that type of decision in the bond market right now. But that's the mechanism that we would look at in doing it. And then I think that's what colleague Alvaro was talking about, is that the more we can encourage DPL to, one, collect their leases, because there's some issues with their collectabilities sometimes, and then two, administer their inventory in a better managed procedure so that they can actually generate revenue a lot more efficiently from the inventory that they currently have, that would then derive more income. And then income after expenses gets grown to MPLT. So if we do that on a regular basis and we increase that amount, logically, the result would be, if we were to direct those monies received to the bond market, that every year the money that we allocate to the legislature that averages around 2 million a year, that would go up to 2.2, 2.7, maybe 3 million, depending on the interest yielded in the bond markets for that year. So that's what the trustees would do. And I think without going through the fiduciary process, right, the first role we would have to do as new trustees is coming in is analyze the current position of the trust, right, and then organize a policy to which the new trustees agree to, and then formalize that policy into a written format, and then implement it after it's been formalized. And then after we've implemented it, you monitor it. So those are the steps of being a fiduciary and the fiduciary process. So I would ask the senators to give us a little time. That I give you this example as not doing my analysis first, but that would be our first step, is to analyze the current position of MPLT, and then we can decide, should DPL give us more money, how we would invest that so we would create more of a benefit to the general fund, for first paying off that debt, the $15 million debt, and then second, look at programs to work jointly with the legislature that will help our indigenous people. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Long. Any other nominees would like to speak to the $250,000 that's frozen in a Russian bank? I fail to see how, and I understand these are sent to your investment managers, but I fail to see how MPLT trustees did not know that we were investing money in foreign assets, and it is now frozen by the U.S. Treasury. I'll recognize Mr. Alvaro Santos for that.
My initial reaction when I read about that, Madam Chair, was Well, first of all, WCM is a discretionary money manager. By that, as most of us know, discretionary money manager is someone who is entrusted with the investment without the investor being involved in the process of buying and selling of the portfolio that money manager is entrusted with. My initial reaction to when I read about that was that the war in Ukraine started a year ago and followed by sanctions that the US government began imposing on Russian interests and US interests in Russian jurisdictions. And the question that came to my mind, which later I asked also some other people, is didn't WCM should have seen the red flags already when the US began sanctioning Russian interests? And I thought that WCM should have considered selling it, maybe realizing a loss or maybe not. But there was a window there at the time that the money manager could have sell it and pull out. Why that discretionary manager, money manager, didn't do it? I don't have the answer to that. Maybe one day we'll get to communicate with them as to why they decided to stick it out, probably, and wishing and hoping that it will just, get better. But then again, the sanctions began compounding to include later on, as we all nowadays, even the oligarchs are becoming targets. So the sanctions was inevitable. But to answer your question, Madam Chair, that's my reaction to that whole matter of the $220,000 being frozen as a result of the sanction.
Thank you. This committee would appreciate getting feedback on that. Maybe in the coming months, we can schedule an informal meeting with trustees of MPLT to be informed of that situation and find out how to recover or invest in other stocks or portfolios that can recover the loss if it is permanently seized by the U.S. Treasury. I will recognize Dr. Sablon.
Thank you, Madam Chair. If I may, I believe that when this story broke out in March 7, it was just a huge surprise to all of us. And even myself, and I go, oh no, why should I become an MPLT trustee if, there's so much risk out there now. But I think this is a lesson learned for all of us. And I do understand that
A very expensive lesson.
Yes,
indeed.
definitely. And of course, there's room for discussion and improvement in this area. And I believe we have about 10 money managers, 10 of them. So out of the 10, there's only one that is a non-U.S. equity. And so, it is something for me as a new board trustee member to go in and find out, how this happened. What can we do about it in the future so that we prevent some things like this from happening again. But please do allow us to go in as a whole, a board of trustee, to revisit this matter, and so that we can come back and give you an update.
We'd appreciate that. Thank you. I'd like to recognize Senator Dennis Mendiola at this time.
Sorry, senators. Before I forget that train of thought. So, you guys' credentials really precedes you guys. So I don't think today's hearing is really on you guys' qualification. Everybody knows you guys are qualified. I do have a question for the two gentlemen that probably served a little bit longer, if I'm correct. do you guys have any? Is there any plans in terms of NMDs? And I really dislike the term NMD just because it's so broad. No, I mean it's such a controversial term, but for our locals to benefit out of MPLT. And I know maybe this is not the right time to ask that question, given the fact, given the financial situation of the CNMI. But I just like to hear it from you too, if you guys ever thought about any plans to try and have our community or our people benefit from some of this funds recognized.
Yeah, Al and I have extensive experience in that. It's difficult. As trustees for the Marianas Public Land Trust, our sole role and responsibility is a fiduciary over the custody of the invested funds. So our basic job is to make sure that we're earning yield and earning a return on the investment every year and monitoring these guys who are handling the money for us. This is blood money. This is our indigenous land, right? So that's the main role. However, we've heard the public's outcry on, this is indigenous land money, yet we're not feeling the impact of the $100 million investment that MPLT is administering. So without doing something directly, which, to be frank, and please excuse my claim here, but it is the legislature's responsibility to then appropriate that money every year to direct impact of indigenous people, right? The problem you have there is a constitutional measure of representing U.S. citizens and indigenous, and then carving out that money for only one specific race, right? I think that's something we're going to address in the Constitution with the initiative that you guys are entertaining in both houses. But going back to our role with MPLT, there's indirect things that we can do from an investment vehicle. So there's like home loans that we've tried and dabbled with. There's real estate that we could do an investment in. So from an investment perspective, without directly impacting indigenous families by individual family with a check, for instance, like an Indian reservation trust, right? We would instead look through our local investment vehicle, or we have a basket of investments that are specifically locally reserved that yields a return. It has to yield a return because that's a responsibility, but we're specifically looking for social type of investment, which is allowed in any type of investment for portfolios, right? That helps society. So that's probably something that the three of us with our other members would explore, because I feel that our economy is on teetering and needs some assistance. But we also have to balance that with making sure that sound investments, not saying that the local investment program isn't sound, it's just saying that the established investment vehicles, bonds, capital investments, private equities, they yield a regular return on a regular basis that can be counted every year and can actually be projected. Whereas a local investment vehicle, it's kind of, we don't know. It's a much higher risk profile, but in exchange for that higher risk profile, we say that we're doing a social investment. So I would say it would be real estate. I would say that it would probably be some sort of a home loan program that we could partner with the DPL on. And I'm open to my other members, any other suggestions they have.
Thank you for that. Anybody else?
Yes. Well, from what I've been reading and listening to people talk about getting NMD benefits, I think they are looking at benefits that go directly to the population, not in form of local investment. Because if we use MPLT money for diversified local investment, then we assess interest. We expect payments, so it goes out to the local population in the form of loans. And I don't think the public are looking at at it from that perspective. They want direct benefit to them. Now, I was thinking about that, and the only way that that could be done could be two ways. One, the legislature has to come up with programs like they do in the mainland with the Indian tribes, uh, the Native Hawaiians. They have Kamehameha High School in Hawaii, where they earmark part, I believe, of that bishop state. They earmark strictly for Hawaiian blood children to go to school. They're restricted by race, and now that is a program. That's an education program. And of course, in the mainland, like what I read in the transition report, they give directly to the tribal people profits generated from casino operations run by Native Americans. But us here, we can have it direct to the people by creating programs, scholarship programs for NMD children, for geriatric services for NMD Manamko, and the like. So to get the full benefit of this, I think between the legislature and the administration, they should start coming up with program ideas and not to hand them out monetary, I mean cash. Money comes, money goes. But programs can be perpetual, Foundations, development banks, something like a credit union owned by NMDs. We can come up with different ideas that collectively can benefit collectively the NMDs, not individuals. So that's my take on that, Senator.
Thank you. Aye for now.
Thank you. Recognize Senator Paul Manglotnya.
Yes, I just want to go back to the transition report on one of the recommendation, and and I quote, since MPLT already has an existing balanced portfolio with representation of a wide scope of asset classes, the CNMI government should consider allowing MPLT to act as a custodian of CNMI investment funds from various agencies and departments and so forth. Can you elaborate, or or you have recommendations? Any recommendations? Like, for example, are you talking about some agencies there out there that you think can benefit from? And by the way, would the Constitution allow that?
I believe it can allow that, Senator. I remember during my chairmanship, I brought that up to some government officials that, when there's government surplus or whatever other agency was generating revenue, that we can use MPLT as a conduit to invest that money. And like DPO that I mentioned earlier, you got money sitting around. Why don't you let us manage it through our money managers or investment mechanism? And apparently, that was not, probably at the time, was not enticing and attractive to those that were.
So MPLT can actually do something a little bit outside of the constitutional requirement of their duties.
I believe so.
Okay, so along that line, let me ask. Let's say take Rota Resort, right? Okay, it's not money, but it's land asset, right? Is that something that we can say give to MPLT and somehow work with NMDs and kind of promote that, run kind of like you know how the Indian casino have casinos, but they don't run it. They hire somebody to run it. They manage it. Because I really don't. I'm really concerned. For example, on some assets like Paupo Hotel or Rota Resort, and DPL is kind of like just waiting for investors to knock at their door. I think if somebody's running the asset, taking care of it, thinking every day how to generate revenue, then something will happen, right? But if you just let it sit there, so I guess my question is that something that you can take and find someone to run it and get revenue, get your cost for managing the asset, and then we can have maybe DPL give it to an NMD company, or I don't know. Can anyone comment on that? Thank you.
Yeah, I think my initial gut reaction is no. MPLT couldn't manage an asset like that. That would be out of our wheelhouse. However, I 1 billion% agree with DPL's lack of administrating of existing assets that have intrinsic value that should be managed properly. And from an MPLT standpoint, to where we derive revenue from the properly managed assets of our public lands. This is our indigenous lands. It's almost as if someone not indigenous is taking care of our property. And I'm sorry to say, but it's almost shameful in some instances that we have beautiful properties like Rota Resort and other properties that as a business person, it kind of irks me to see that type of value and it just sitting rotting, and we're not even cutting the grass for instance. And being a trustee now and receiving the benefit over an asset that is no longer being managed, that's even worse. So I agree with you, Senator. I think that there needs to be a lot more activity, and MPLT should us three be appointed. I can tell you that's going to be something that I'm very interested in pushing DPL to make sure that they're raising enough money every year through the active management of their assets so that we derive a benefit at MPLT. Now, going to the administration of an asset, I would say that would have to be DPL's purview, or the legislature as a policymaker. You could mandate certain things to happen. However, that could be an investment vehicle if it is enticing enough and has a lower risk profile to look at. MPLT would always look at it the local investment side. Now, in lieu of us analyzing the current position, my assumption is that basket is full with the existing loan that we have with the general fund. But should the general fund continue to pay that off, or should we accelerate that, then the basket gets a little empty. And now we have assets or cash that we have an ability to deploy in a particular investment like Rota Resort or whatever property that DPL is now actively managing. And I agree that the way that we could combine resources, especially MPLT being $100 million fund, I always wondered why agencies who have liquidity or cash is not using the whip that MPLT has for money management. We pay millions of dollars for some of the best managers in the world to manage our trust fund, yet nobody else in the CNMI uses that access basically for free. So for instance, if PSS wanted to go to a money manager and have them manage $4 million or something, they're going to be paying 1.3% management fee. With us, they're yielding maybe 0.2, 0.3 management fee. So that's what we mean by combining resources. If the CNMI has cash
But Phil,
buffers,
can you explain why in 2021 we have 130 million asset, both the fixed general fund and the park, and now it's 111? What happened? I'm sorry, maybe I missed something, but from 130 in 2021 to 111, no?
I'm sorry, Senator, I can't answer that because I wasn't there, but I would I'll give you an answer as long as I can analyze their current position and give you a better understanding.
Are you aware, Mr. Santos?
Uh,
It was
Chair-
130, right, in 21, and then in 2022 it went down to 111, unless they classify some, in a different classification. But I don't know whether that was answered by MPLT last year.
I need to look into that, Senator, to get more clarity. But right off the bat, I would assume that taking 15 million out of the corpus for the U2 loan could be one of the reasons. Because
Reflect as asset, right? Because it's a loan. But I'm just curious. I think they left, MPLT people left, but I kind of like, I was going to ask that to them actually.
well,
We received a report, 130 total in 21, and then 111.
My only explanation right off the bat, without the full knowledge of it, is that, well, you have 130, then you take out a 15 million to give to the government. That will, of course, decrease the corpus body.
Okay, well,
Right
maybe
now-
when you get in, please kind of report that to us. We appreciate.
Yes.
Thank you, Senator Paul Manglonia. Recognize Senator Donald Manglonia.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My question is just very general, and this is for Dr. Sablan and Mr. Santos. Looks like you'll only be serving another 8 months, and so do you plan, if given the opportunity, to go beyond that? Because if that's the case, then we can always come back at the end of the year to see how you've done these in the next couple of months. So is this something that you plan to do after the term is up, if given the opportunity?
Thank you, Senator Manglonia. I am happy to serve the general public once again. So if I'm needed beyond the 1 year, I'm available.
Thank you, Senator. The same with me. MPLT is, I hold MPLT dear to me. I was there for 6 years, and I get excited with the function and the mandate of MPLT investments, and of course, just the idea that it is an agency that the goal is to provide for posterity excites me, and I want to see that it succeeds.
Thank you. And again, I ask that because in another 8 months, we may be, or we'll be seeing you again if that's the case, and then we can do a lot of follow up then. Mr. Santos, based on your resume, there hasn't been any activity since you've retired. Have you been involved in any outside organizations or anything like that since 2002?
Well, I was when I retired, I adjunct for the NMC for a year. Then Governor Eloy appointed me to the Casino Commission. I was with the Humanities Council. I served in the Humanities Council for several years.
But no other involvement in any business activities with other organizations?
No, not really.
And I've been pretty much satisfied with your responses to Senator the other three members, but just last one for the two former trustees. Well, Mr. Santos, you were fairly well. It's been over 10 years, and then Mr. Long, it's been over 19 years since you were last a trustee. Is that correct?
No, I served twice actually. So I think my last term was 2000 with Alan.
2011. Oh, 2006.
Yeah, about 11.
So is there anything that you think would, you want to see differently from back then, about a decade ago to today? I mean, based on what you know now and based on what you've seen over the past decade with all the other former trustees.
Wow, that is when Senator Paul started the conversation, being a member twice, both times I resigned. And it was over integrity issues and steps that I just wasn't willing to make because of the political pressure. Oftentimes, boards or commissions, you get a call and you're expected to carry something out on behalf of the administration or the political machine. So that'd probably be the one thing. I'm hopeful with the new administration, the promises they've made to our people, that practice is going to stop. And so that would be the only thing that I would see as a major change. MPLT is a machine. I mean, they have great employees, great legal counsels, great money managers. And once the two members and us and myself get in there, like I said, we'll go through the fiduciary process, analyze our position, formulate new policy, implement it, and then monitor it. It kind of occurs by itself, right? It's when we start getting into the weeds about, the other question about how do we direct investment to help our people, to where then politics comes into play. And so that's the only thing, Senator, that I would hope to change or avoid being a third time appointee to MPLT. I promise this time I'll try not to resign. But again, if my integrity is in question or somebody's asking me to do something, usually I'm known for that guy. If not, I'm just not going to do it. I'll leave. But thank you for the question. I appreciate it.
Anything you want to see differently, Mr. Santos?
Well, I share Mr. Long's feeling too about membership. Politics, I think, is not very healthy if it starts infringing in the affairs of MPLT, and where the red flag is pretty obvious. That's when a trustee becomes frustrated, and then you begin to wonder whether you're just being used as part of a political ploy. And I had some experience in that area during my 6-year term, and I tried to navigate out of it, trying to mediate my position, like, okay, I know this is your need, but the interest of MPLT is paramount. I try to work within that scope of behavior, because like emergency declaration was one of them, and probably there'll be some more in the future. And then you beg the question, to what extent do you entertain? Is that for real, or they're just using the agency to satisfy a political agenda? So but I will repeat again that in the future I would like to see DPL's relationship with MPLT could be a lot better, and that they will respect their role of remitting public land lease money to MPLT, so we can do our job properly of investing it, and it's for everybody's good, for the government, for the NMDs, because we want to grow the portfolio, realize more earnings, and more benefits, of course, and the ability to future give loans again to the government in times of dire situations. We just have to be astute about it and take our roles seriously.
Thank you for that. Madam Chair, you.
Thank you. I have a few questions before we close off. One, so this property that was purchased by MPLT, it is my understanding today that there have been no improvements made to that property. Is that correct?
I am not sure, but I believe so. It is sitting there, and I cannot answer for the other trustees
Okay.
that have been in charge of it.
Thank you. And I'm glad you guys brought up the relationship between DPL and MPLT. It seems to be a very acrimonious, or at least lately in the last few years, an acrimonious relationship. It reminds me of husband and wife constantly at each other's throats, really. How can MPLT decipher for themselves what exactly DPL needs for their operation and administrative costs, and then transmit any excess to MPLT as required by the Constitution and the laws? How do you guys know? Is it whatever DPL says it has in excess? I mean, clearly in the last few years alone, in the previous administration, DPL has been administering a scholarship program. And it's not specific to NMD. It's open to the general public. While the intention is noble, I honestly do not believe they have the statutory authority to issue scholarships. So that's one area I'd like for MPLT members to consider seriously. They have turned into not only leasing public lands, but they've now usurped scholarship and Shefa authority. And I don't even know how they base themselves on. I think it's based on an essay, if I'm not mistaken. There's no set criteria of whether you are in an accredited institution, if I'm not mistaken. So that's one thing I'd like to ask MPLT to please look into DPL. If you need our assistance, the legislature is here to help you. If we need to call them in and ask them for actual expenses of their office, I am willing to do that. We need to get to the bottom of that. I honestly believe there's some things going on at DPL, at least from what I receive, messages and letters from constituents. So how can, and at one point, if I'm not mistaken, it's in the transition report, DPL owes MPLT approximately $50 million. Is that correct?
Cumulative.
Yes, cumulatively MPLT. And I know in previous years that MPLT tried to sue DPL, and then as recently as the last Board of Trustees before they resigned, before some of them resigned, there was an attempt, or at least talk, to pursue a lawsuit to collect those arrears from DPL. And I'd like to know the status of that. While I don't agree that we should be spending money to file a lawsuit, because that's costly, what can be done to have MPLT and DPL sit down at the table? If you guys need to use the legislature chamber, all we have to do is clear it, and we can be there to either mediate or whatever. But that, we can't continue to deprive our NMDs of monies they are owed by DPL to MPLT to grow their corpus and have a bigger return. So that's my comment for that. I want to ask the nominees, if confirmed, can you please establish some kind of procedure to sit down at the table with DPO? I think that's one of the first things MPLT trustees should do. That's all I have for today. Recognize Senator Paul Minglonia.
Thank you, Madam Chair. If there's ever a time for MPLT to actually invest in the community, I think we can all agree that it is now, right? Especially when we're talking about the small businesses. Unfortunately, many of these boost applicants, they were not awarded some grants. And I'm thinking about income from your outside the Commonwealth investment. How much? I have no feel, but can you look into that and see how much of that income? And I'm not talking about the increased income that you give the general fund. It's I guess it's under your diversified local investment. If there's ever a time, I think it is now, and I see that the interest rate is very low, 5%. Even if you can go lower, and if we can work with CDA, SEDA, and see what kind of loans we can give to those small businesses, especially those that are in the agricultural or fishery, and those applicants many of those kind of businesses actually have application and they were never considered. Would you be open to such? And I think that you would agree that there's a need for low interest loan, right? I mean, if we want to bring back our economy, and if we want to restore their dreams, those young people that actually are thinking of opening shops, small businesses, produce locally produced items here. Do you think there's a possibility? And I'm looking at Phil and Al because they've been there and they know the sources for this local investment. Can we hear from you guys?
Yes, I think that is something that we can explore, Senator, since right now we have the diversified local investment. We have with CHCC, we have with the Tinian Shipping Service, and of course, the NMHC that is ongoing, in which City Trust Bank was entrusted to be collecting from the home loan program, which we and it was. I recall during my time when we recall that from NMHC because it was not performing the $10 million investment with NMHC that we took back, and we tried to rehabilitate it by making the loan affordable. We dropped the interest rate to 2% because we were at, we were thinking that we got to keep people in their homes, not foreclose, reduce the foreclosures, and drop the 2%, drop the interest rate to 2%. So we did that. Initially, we contracted Bank of Saipan to do the collecting, but I think over time now they awarded City Trust Bank. So that's still ongoing, and I think in the transition report it shows that the CHCC, the CHCC is going to be paid off this year, but the NMHC home loan program is continuing. They're still collecting loan payments from homeowners that borrowed.
Money that MPLT is trying to get from DPL sitting somewhere in a bank account now? Is there any that we can maybe ask the DPL to transfer so we can tap those money? Is there any now?
according to the transition report, Senator, I believe there's still some monies that uh, like cumulative $50 million that DPO is supposed to have remitted to
But
MPLT,
I'm
but
sure they're not sitting anywhere, right? I mean, that's just
that I don't know. I would like to find.
can we look into that? Let me.
like to find
You
out.
mentioned NMHC. That housing area in Garapan, that was supposed to be for housing project that DPO gave them, and they're not doing safe sanitary housing project now. They're renting it out. Shouldn't those lease payment be going to MPLT? Or is it just staying at NMHC? And I have a problem with that because now there are lots of federal money for low income housing, and if they're not going to use that, I think we need to look at those revenues and maybe use those revenues for low interest loan for small businesses. They're not giving those revenues to MPLT now.
Those houses that you're talking about, Senator, those houses were NMHC houses. The $10 million that we gave NMHC to invest, about 20 some years ago, 30 years ago, they were for individual residential homes in which the borrower borrow from NMHC, and then they will build their houses in their private lots that they own somewhere.
Yes, and you're getting paid for that using Banco CD Trust, right? You gave it to them, or
Yes, when we recall from NMHC
You gave-
the portfolio because it was not performing, they were mismanaging it, so we took it back.
okay. But
And-
my question is the housing, those Garapan
Oh,
housing.
those MPLT had nothing to do with those houses. Those were strictly NMHC built houses.
Yeah, but right now NMHC is not using it for low income. They're renting it out,
Oh,
and they're trying to
but
find investment
MPLT
for
is out
that.
of that.
You don't have an issue with that?
No, we are not. We were not, and still not involved in the construction of those houses, and even the disposition like renting or selling. We were just concerned with the 10 million that we gave them for individual residential home loans.
Yeah. So, Senator Paul, you're touching on a really sensitive issue that we've talked about after Al left. Is that at the MPLT, there's administration of DPL assets is not being managed properly, meaning there'll be interagency transfer of property to where the secondary agency then derives income from the use of CNMI public land at a state level, non-indigenous, right? So walk you through it. DPL will transfer fee simple property to NMHC for the purposes of low income development housing, and then NMHC is going to provide housing and land for people who are in need at that particular time. Noble, very good. It helps our society. The question is, from an NMI descent ownership, they've lost in that transaction. So NMI descent people are not deriving any income from a state function, and the state represents all races. So the problem MPLT has is that when the agencies start transferring property willy-nilly, and specifically, for instance, if you look at CUC, there's a telephone pole on public land throughout the island. IT&E lays their cable throughout the island. And oftentimes these are leased or just conveyed for CUC's perspective. CUC puts the pole in, and then IT&E or Saipan Cable runs their cable on the telephone pole. They're riding on the use of that public land. So the question is from the legislature standpoint, at where do we start billing people? And MPLT would be very interested in advocating on the protection of the indigenous rights at that point. because we manage those monies on behalf of our indigenous population. So if we were to go down that road, you're exactly right, Senator, that NMC property, there should be revenue derived from that NMHC should have to pay to DPL, and DPL earning that lease payment for the property, not the house rental, of course, but the underlying property. NMHC should be paying a monthly fee for that, because as NMHC as a state function agency is not the same as an indigenous protected race class. So
But yeah,
that's
and we understand that, but and sometimes we close our eyes on those, but this is totally a different issue. You give NMHC for housing, and they're not using it for housing. Now they have taken over that and renting it out for whatever business purposes, and they have no business in that. So that's something that we should take away from NMHC and give it to DPL and invest it, lease it out to some investors if NMHC do not have a plan for housing in that area, right? I mean, it's okay if they're going to build a subdivision there, but they have no plan for subdivision. And so what I'm saying is it would have been okay maybe if it was for housing, but we know that they're not promoting it for housing. And I'm thinking that since they're earning revenue, this is where we can take those lease payments and convert it to a program for small businesses and our local people to help in our economy. Because right now, I understand that's another program where I don't even know how those tenant got in there. I mean, it wasn't even, I don't know how publicized that was, but they're paying, I think, 500 a month. So it's not being well managed, right? And I don't know. That's something that you have to look into. I appreciate if you really get with DPL, NMHC, and because it involves you, and that actually brings me to, I know that we're looking at the time now, but is your legal counsel looking into other areas that are similarly in this kind of situation? Because you know, for example, your former project, for example, at the harbor in Tinian, right? That's given to CPA for CPA operation. This is one of those that it's not totally related to CPA. They're making money, and where's the money going? The revenue of the lease payment. So, these are example of areas that are a little bit gray, and I think that we need to start looking at that and addressing those kind of issues, and so that MPLT gets their money. They don't need to play politics to get their money and to push certain projects, and that's the only time they get it. So, Chair, I don't want to take a lot of time, but I see that MPLT is here, some members, and I just want to ask, why is it from 130 to 111 in a matter of 1 year? Is that because of the pandemic, your investment? Can somebody explain that to the committee? Anybody, MPLT? The total asset was 130 in 2021, and it went down to 111 in 2022. Can somebody elaborate?
Senator Paul, I think that question is appropriate in a letter. This committee
Okay.
hearing is only for the
Okay.
nominees
So
examination.
we'll get a letter from the
So, okay,
committee. Thank you.
appreciate that. I have no further questions. Any other members? If none, we will now break for recess. It is 12:25 p.m. Thank you.